Hi everybody, how you doing? So this was going to be a live stream, but I decided against it. I set it up, I did a test to see how things would play out, and the audio was awful. The live stream was lagging because I was playing a video file. I think it's because I'm using an old laptop, it just couldn't handle it. So I thought, scrub that, I'll do it as a video because then everybody's getting decent quality. I'm not going to let anybody down, I'm not going to start a live stream tonight and have the whole thing just fail and then have to abandon it and look silly. So we're going to do it old school Vindicator style of a critique of somebody's video. And we are actually going to do a forensic analysis in this video, unlike Politico and what he did with Tommy Robinson's Silenced. So without further ado, we'll let Politico just move this audio across here. So that's better, I can get to it now. And we'll let him speak in his own words.
Tommy has no one to blame but himself for what might well be a prison sentence in the following days for contempt of court for breaching an injunction to prevent him from repeating evidence which he brought as defence to the libel charge brought by the Syrian immigrant Jamal Hijazi.
Right, note it, even the first part of the video, there's bias in there. Compared to what he's done in other videos regarding other people that have fallen foul of the law. I'm talking about Lucy Colony. He made a video defending her and basically called the judge an activist judge in that situation. Now, Lucy Colony did actually breach the Malicious Communications Act. She did call for migrant hotels to be set on fire. That is a malicious communication, that's inciting violence. But Politico, in this instance, comes to her defence. He didn't say to her that she knew what she was doing and that she's only got herself to blame for the situation she's in. Just highlighting that bias. First off, just want to make another disclaimer as well. I don't agree with anybody being sent to prison for posts they've posted online. Did any of those people deserve those massive prison sentences? No, of course they didn't. They were first-time offenders. If anything, they just deserved community service, a suspended sentence, or be under house arrest under tag. That was it. They didn't deserve to be sent to prison for posts on social media. Just want to make that quite clear.
For statements which Tommy made about this immigrant lad's alleged propensity for violence against girls, which was shown to be false when put under the microscope of the court. Tommy has no legitimate grievance. He's done all this with his eyes wide open, and he is leading his many well-intentioned supporters, including no doubt quite a few of you folks, up the garden path and out of pocket.
It's interesting, that statement, isn't it? Again, he's saying that Tommy Robinson's got nothing else to blame, and apparently that the law is the law in this circumstance. There can be no scrutiny of how the law is dealing with Tommy Robinson. He doesn't take in consideration that the judicial system has an agenda against Tommy Robinson. He's already admitted in a previous video that judges can be activists. They can have an agenda of their own. But when it comes to Tommy Robinson, no, the law is the law, and he deserved everything he got. He knew what he was doing, so therefore he broke the law. Again, highlighting this guy's bias towards Tommy Robinson. So this is another video that Politico did. It's entitled "The Deranged Sentencing of Lucy Conley from an Activist Judge, Melbourne Imam." Notice from the title of the video, and this video was made 2 weeks before he made the video about Tommy Robinson. So it's not like he changed his mind after the fact and decided, you know what, I think the judiciary is a bit biased. He knew well before he made the Tommy Robinson video that some judges, in his opinion, are actually activists and may have a political agenda behind their decisions. But what I want you to do from this video is, because I'm going to play it in a minute, I want you to listen to the tone he takes when talking about Lucy Conley than the tone he takes when he's talking about Tommy Robinson and his case.
This is where we start. Number 1. Lucy Connolly, you have pleaded guilty to the offence of distributing material with the intention of stirring up racial hatred. Hobson's choice, guilty plea with gun to head. Plead guilty or plead not guilty, be found guilty and get a longer sentence is no choice whatsoever, and no conclusions can be drawn from that. But we can at least be...
Right, so he didn't afford Tommy Robinson that benefit of the doubt, did he? Tommy Robinson was guilty as charged. You pleaded guilty, you knew the consequences, what would happen if you did what you did. It's your fault, you committed the act, therefore you're responsible. But for Lucy Connolly, that isn't the case, is it? There's none of this, oh, the law is the law, you know what you were doing, now you've got to accept the consequences of your actions. And for the record, like I said before, I don't believe any of these people should be in prison for social media posts whatsoever. All I'm doing here is I'm trying to point out the bias and the different way in which Politico treats different people. He treats Tommy Robinson differently to Lucy Connolly. He gives Lucy Connolly the benefit of the doubt and defends her actions, whereas with Tommy Robinson, it's completely Tommy's fault, and it's all his fault that he's in the situation that he's in. He doesn't give him any a credence to say that maybe Tommy Robinson broke the ruling of the court regarding the libel case and played the video because he wanted the truth to come out for noble reasons. He doesn't afford him anything like that whatsoever. No, what Tommy did, he broke the law, therefore he's paying the full price and he should have known better.
This video, as you will have noticed, steps outside the normal confines of the echo chamber. People do seem to like my forensic approach, but they also seem to think that...
Trust me, this was anything but forensic. You've clearly got a bias against Tommy Robinson, and that's blatantly obvious.
This kind of a forensic lens can somehow be configured to point in only one direction. It doesn't work that way. It's worth saying that just to soften the blow for what's to come, but also since I will be absolutely deluged with a tsunami of downvotes as this video progresses, probably now, from the Echo Chamber Brigade, if you would be so kind as to lend me...
It's not really an echo chamber though, is it? Because I went to your comment section, people just highlighting the fact that you weren't taking certain evidence into account. Fair enough, the court didn't take that evidence into account, but we have to ask questions, why didn't that court take that evidence into account, which was crucial to Tommy Robinson's defence in this situation? Is it because the court has an agenda against him? We've already established that the judicial system is not fair and equal. It applies the law differently to certain people based on their gender, their skin colour, what political beliefs they hold. We know this for certain.
A like on this video up front. You can always take it back at the end if you want. That will assist in counteracting the downvote tidal wave and give the algorithm a little boost. Okay, a video of mine was posted in a Twitter thread which got quite an enthusiastic response, since when I have been inundated with several hundred versions of one particularly badly informed comment. So, starting with this, which I posted in response to Tommy's, as it was then, most recent claim to martyrdom. This is rubbish. The reason Tommy will likely go to jail is that he defied a legitimate and reasonable court order to prevent him spreading lies about the debunked evidence he offered in his libel defence. Tommy was not cheated and he has no one to blame but himself.
But let's look at that, right? Because the judge in this circumstance chose and said that certain evidence that would have backed Tommy Robinson's case up wasn't admissible as evidence. Why is that? We have all the testimonies and the secret recordings of the teachers involved in this case. That wasn't admissible. The judge wouldn't look at that. So there was nothing to corroborate what Tommy Robinson was saying in court. So it wasn't that the evidence was debunked. It was that certain evidence that could corroborate that evidence wasn't allowed in court. So therefore it was more easier to dismiss. So there, we're establishing an agenda there, aren't we? Why would the judge not allow certain evidence into court? Why is that? Evidence that would have basically proved what Tommy Robinson and some of the witnesses were saying was actually true. If you want to guide the way a particular case or judgment is going to go, then the way you could do it is to say certain evidence isn't admissible into court, couldn't you? Therefore, swaying the way the court proceedings go. But this guy doesn't take that into consideration. Let's not forget, we've already established from him, he's already admitted that judges can have a political agenda in court. He called one judge, it's on screen right now, an activist judge. So we've already established this guy doesn't really believe that the judicial system is fair and equal to everybody.
And this elicited one of many versions of the same comment. Almost without fail, anyone who says that S-word above simply hasn't watched the documentary. They're just jumping on the same old narrative given by the establishment. Weak people. Me, I must have heard this line 1,000 times. I understand it, because I thought the same thing when I first saw it. I thought, geez, this is an outrage. Unfortunately, Tommy's lies are only half the story, which are debunked by the other half, i.e. the court scrutiny. Followers of this channel may...
See, that's the thing though, isn't it? The evidence that he was allowed to put into court was easily dismissed. So you're saying, oh well, the court half debunked his evidence. Well, that's not true, is it? It's a bit misleading what you're saying there, because you're just dismissing the fact that half the evidence that he had wasn't allowed to be put into court or to be scrutinised by the court. If it had, this would have been a completely different outcome. And let's not forget, right, Tommy Robinson has been denied a trial by jury. He's never been tried by a jury, ever. It's always been a judge that's looking at certain aspects. Why is that? Is that because people might look at the actual evidence and come to a conclusion that the establishment doesn't really want them to come to? We already know that lawfare is a thing. And at the time of making this video, this guy knew that the Terrorism Act had been used against Tommy Robinson wrongfully to detain him, to gain access to his phone so that they could look out at his sources. And he refused them access on the basis that he had journalistic sources on that phone and that they were not privy to that information. Information about the police and a certain MP, certain Labour MP. There's ulterior motives going on here, but this guy fails to see it, and you'll see it all the way through this video.
Remember that I actually made a video about Tommy's film after seeing it. This one here, which I uploaded on June the 12th last year. I rushed it out of public view once I had realised that I'd been had, but this is an extract from it. And I'm also going to use this as a pivot into the main point of the video. So here I am, questioning media double standards in the video which I made after watching Tommy's film. And if a boy pouring the contents of a bottle of water over another boy causes media hell and high water to be rained down on the perpetrator, why does a boy hitting a girl on the back with a hockey stick not cause any kind of a ripple whatsoever? Because my slightly younger and less informed self, it didn't happen. So what I'm going to do here is take a very close...
So here he is, he's saying that the incident with the hockey stick didn't happen. Now, if you've actually watched the Silenced documentary, you would know that a teacher mentioned that incident, and he admits himself in another video that a teacher's testimony is stronger than that of a child's. Now, why were the teacher testimonies, why were those secret recordings not allowed to be given as evidence in court? Is it because if they were, it will corroborate Tommy's story? It would also corroborate the witness stories as well. And maybe that's the reason why they were denied to be admitted into court.
Look, using the full spectrum of information available at one representative example for brevity and simplicity. And when his film came out, indulging a spot of the abstract here, the film was all we had, so this information spectrum space was filled by the film and nothing else. But when the court report came out, it changed from this here to this. Film now occupying only half the spectrum and the court case occupying the other. There are three parts to this full information space, And starting with the film and my selected example of the hockey stick incident in which a girl claimed to have been attacked by the immigrant boy in question, and which Tommy used in his defence.
Basically, we were in a PE lesson and we were playing hockey with a teacher called Mr. Cattell, and I had taken the hockey puck off of Jamal because I was on the other team and sent it to the other side of the room where my teammates were, and I then turned around and just felt a really sharp pain in my back, and he'd swung the hockey stick over his head and hit me in the spine with it. It knocked me to my knees. I've had lasting injuries from it. It's caused me to have severe pain in the top of my back, and I'm on medication for the pain.
Still now?
Yeah.
The crucial thing is that this is where most people tune out. So of course they think it's an outrage. Who wouldn't? But we are blessed with more information. And we can move on to part 2, which 99.999% of people don't see. The video couldn't be played in court, obviously, because it's an edited, pixelated clip of an unidentified girl. We need to know who the girl is.
But I'm guessing there was actually unedited versions of that could be played in court. And if there was, why wasn't that allowed to be played in court? You see, there's questions to be asked about this. In any documentary, there's raw footage that has to be edited down to cut the runtime or whatever. But that original footage is still in existence. So why wasn't that shown in court? Again, if you're going to analyse evidence, you have to look at both sides of the argument, and you're just not doing that in this video. See, I'm asking that question straight away. Well, why wasn't the raw footage allowed in court then? Is it because the court or the judge has an agenda against Tommy Robinson? Maybe so.
We need to get a full explanation, not just an edited one, which is then signed, sealed, and delivered. And we get that in the form of a written statement, which is in effect the video up to the required standards. The whole thing occupies just one page. It starts here, and the bit relevant to that clip is down the bottom. I still suffer pain and discomfort to my back. I have attended my GP and had different x-rays and MRI scans. I currently see a chiropractor for the pain and take medication from my doctor. I take 30 milligrams of codeine up to 4 times a day and 25 milligrams of pregabalin twice a day, as well as paracetamol and ibuprofen. This is basically repeating her content in the film, but the film stops there. There is no scrutiny. This is now the scrutiny. According to Charlie, she had undergone both x-rays and MRI scans. There are no records. Fourth, Charlie claimed, even now, 4 years later, to be in significant pain as a result of the incident and still to be taking prescription painkillers. Yet, no medical records have been produced to confirm this.
Notice that bit there. No medical records have been produced to confirm this. So that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means no records have been sent to the court to confirm the situation. That might mean several reasons. That the patient didn't give permission for her medical records to be submitted to court, which can be done. This is only a civil case. Don't forget, it's not a criminal case. So the person might have to have their permission to show that sort of stuff. Why didn't the prosecution ask for these records to be shown? Because surely the judge would have mentioned that the patient denied access to her medical records, but he doesn't here. So it doesn't mean the situation didn't happen. It just means that those relevant records weren't submitted to the court. And let's not forget, I think Tommy Robinson was representing himself. Now, I think he himself would admit that that was a mistake. Maybe he didn't have the money at the time to represent himself in court. He does now. He has a legal team, so maybe he's learnt from his mistakes. And if he had a legal team, they would have been straight on that, and they would have asked for those medical records. Maybe there's mitigating factors as to why this person didn't want to get more involved in this situation. I mean, this was a written statement. She wasn't there in court testifying to this, was she? We know from the actual silenced documentary that people were being intimidated by the local certain demographic community into being silent. They were being threatened with sexual assault and all manner of violence to keep quiet. So there are mitigating factors into why certain evidence might not have been admitted or submitted in this situation.
On the contrary, the only information I have from Charlie's GP is a letter from the 18th of January 2018 stating that she has no medical problems. In her evidence, Charlie stated this is the same GP who...
That could mean anything. I know myself from my GP that I've had sick notes in the past from work where I've had pain in my back and stuff like that, but they've not classed it as a medical condition because it's not chronic. It's not chronic pain. It just comes every now and again. It's not like I've got it every single day. If that's the case, then he's quite right that the girl doesn't have any medical conditions. It depends on what GP you get, how they interpret pain. Some might say that pain is a medical condition. Some might describe pain as, if you've got it constantly, then yeah, that's chronic pain, that's a medical condition. But if you just have it from time to time, then that's not a medical condition. So that's open to interpretation. Doesn't mean that she wasn't hit in the back with a hockey stick or anything like that. He might have been constrained in what he could say because the patient didn't want her medical records disclosed. So he just did a blanket statement. That might be the case in this situation. Again, the judge doesn't mention Charlie not wanting to give her medical records as evidence or anything like that, does she? So again, it's not like the whole situation didn't happen just because there are no records submitted to the court. And indeed, if the secret recordings had have been admissible into court, there was a teacher that corroborated this young girl's story by mentioning the fact she said in the video, and let's not forget about the hockey in the back incident. Right, so now we're going to play an extract from Tommy Robinson's Silenced, the Victim. This is Charlie's testimony that she's given to Tommy Robinson. And after it, we're going to hear from the teacher that actually corroborates what Charlie is saying. And then you'll understand why, when you have the teacher's testimony along with what Charlie said, that's a more meatier bit of evidence backing what Tommy is saying than just Charlie's statements and testimony on its own.
Jamal was in your year?
Yeah, he was in the same year as me.
What was Jamal's attitude like at school?
He wasn't very nice. He called female teachers bitches. He just didn't really have respect for the female students, to be honest. Yeah, basically, we were in a PE lesson and we were playing hockey with a teacher called Mr. Cattell, and I had taken the hockey puck off of Jamal because I was on the other team and sent it to the other side of the room where my teammates were, and I then turned around and just felt a really sharp pain in my back, and he'd swung the hockey stick over his head and hit me in the spine with it.
Do you think there's any way that could have been an accident?
No. It knocked me to my knees.
It knocked you to your knees. How long had Jamal been at school when this happened?
About 2 weeks. I've had lasting injuries from it. It's caused me to have severe pain in the top of my back, and I'm on medication for the pain.
Still now?
Yeah.
Did Jamal get in trouble for this?
Not that I'm aware of.
First, I want to apologise to anyone I've been forced to record with a hidden camera. Sadly, people are terrified to tell the truth because of the potential consequences. But the truth still needs to be told.
Do you remember of any incident specifically with Jamal with girls?
Well, do you that one where he hit that girl with hockey stick, wasn't it?
Yeah, Charlie.
Charlie.
Yeah.
I think of her name then.
Yeah, let's go.
Lovely little girl, that.
Yeah.
It was just rude to him, obnoxious, bloody nastily. no respect for ladies, no respect for girls. Expected everybody to bow down to him.
Because I was like, he was like to the side of me, so he like tried like pushing me and like, so I quickly moved out because obviously I knew what he was like, he would have actually hit me and stuff. Yeah. So I moved and then he like moved his arms as if he was going to try to slap my face like
Okay. And he shot back. He did, but on that day he spat at you multiple times.
So there you go. That adds more weight to the testimony than just the girl on her own, because without that teacher's testimony, the judge can just dismiss that as just Charlie making stuff up, can't he? That adds a lot more weight to the story than just a testimony alone. And this is probably one of the reasons why the judge wouldn't allow these these secret recordings to be admitted as evidence in court, because they back up what these kids were saying, that this Jamal kid was a nasty piece of work, he made stuff up, he was obnoxious, and he was violent towards people. That goes against the narrative. That can't be allowed to come out in court, because then that casts doubt on the character of Jamal and whether the claims that he's made are actually true, doesn't it? And of course, Politico doesn't take any of this into consideration. He didn't even look at the teacher testimonies. He didn't include them in his videos, because he knows if he did, then his arguments wouldn't carry that much weight, would they? When talking about Jamal. So it's not like the incident didn't happen and you're just not looking at this objectively. I'm sorry, but you're not.
Who she claimed had been prescribing her pain relief medication. The hockey stick incident, as described by Charlie, did not happen. So the full spectrum of information, which for most people stops halfway through after the film, is now complete. Start with the film alone. Turn the film content into a properly scrutinizable statement and scrutinize it. Scrutinize this. I have attended my GP and had different x-rays and MRI scans, and that results in there are no records. Scrutinize this. I take 30 milligrams of codeine at 4.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. Right, let's look at the girl's age. So apparently she's at college at the time of the making. Was it 2021? So the incident happened in 2018. So that's 3 years till 2021 when the case came up. So she'd probably be about 19 years of age. And I looked into this with a simple Google search, that people under the age of 18, their MRI scans and x-rays are only kept for 2 years. So it might not be the fact that no records existed. It just means they don't exist now because they were gotten rid of. That's something that this guy just doesn't bring into the situation. There's been no research into any of this at all. He's just going completely on what this statement from the judge. And like I said before, he's already established that certain judges have an agenda, a political agenda. Let's not forget the high priority of this case. Lots of people, including Prime Minister Theresa May, lots of celebrities, lots of high-powered people came out in defence of Jamal. If this documentary was widespread and you looked at it closely on the scrutiny, you would think, why the hell were these people endorsing this boy in the first place? So there's a vested interest for that silence documentary to be banned by the establishment. Okay?
4 times a day, etc., and that results in the only information has no medical problems. This is just a tiny part of the scrutiny of her statement, and the totality of that is only a small part of the whole thing. The demands of brevity. It's a microcosm of everything, of the lot. The rest is much the same, just less categoric. But what could be more categoric than there are no records where there absolutely would be?
That's not what the judge says, though, is it? The judge said in his statement that no records were put forward in the case. So that doesn't mean that the records don't exist. It just means the judge doesn't have the records, doesn't it? And let's not forget, the teacher, the one who wasn't allowed to be admitted into court, the recording of her, confirms that Charlie was attacked with a hockey stick. You're saying the whole situation never happened. There's certain information that, if allowed to be admitted into court, would corroborate what this girl is saying.
Courts. The actual evidence range is something like excessively vague through very implausible up to downright impossible.
It's not though, is it? It's not vague. It's not vague and impossible. The fact of the matter is, we're only getting half the story, because only half the story is being allowed to be admissible into court. If we had the recordings, the raw footage, the unedited footage of those interviews that Tommy did with those teachers, it would corroborate everything that Tommy Robinson is saying.
And if you want to see the lot, not just a closely examined extract, you can have a look at my video, and I will put the link in the description box of this video. Now I have laid out in the clearest possible terms: film, statement, scrutiny. Claim plus scrutiny equals claim debunked. So you see how you're in...
No, it's not debunked, is it? Not based on the evidence, not based on all the evidence. It's not debunked because certain evidence wasn't allowed to be placed into the court or into court scrutiny. And why was that? Well, you know, we keep saying, why is that? It's because the judiciary has an agenda. It doesn't want certain information being put into the public eye for scrutiny or under the court's scrutiny, because if it did, it would prove Tommy Robinson correct. And that couldn't happen in this instance, could it? Like I've already said, this was a very high-profile case. Lots of famous people, lots of powerful people came out in defence of Jamal. If this documentary came out and was seen by the whole public and everybody, they would know that the establishment fitted up this story, that blew it out of all proportion. It would blow the lid off of everything. And that's why the court wanted this documentary banned. And yes, Tommy Robinson was censored in this instant. And you won't convince me otherwise, because that's what the evidence says. You're just looking at what the judge is saying in this instance and not looking at the bigger picture, at the agenda that's going on here.
Initial perception of the film, the only perception that most people have, is literally turned on its head with more information.
It's not more information though, is it? It's just this judge's opinion on the evidence that was allowed to be admissible into court. If the other evidence was allowed to be admissible into court, it would change the whole picture and the events that happened, wouldn't it?
Most people stop at the film because the bar to going beyond that is so high. You have to either read a 30-page, an 80-page judgment, or watch my film, which is 30 minutes long, but it's still quite an ask to get through the lot of it. So it is entirely reasonable that people think that Tommy has been censored for telling the truth. But now that you've seen a tiny extra...
You say you're not biased when you do mocking gestures like that. It's quite obvious you've got an axe to grind against Tommy Robinson when you mock him like that.
From it, representative of the whole thing, laid out as painfully categorically as it is possible to lay the thing out. If you are...
It's not actual reality though, is it? It's the court's reality. It's the court's interpretation of the information that it allowed to be presented. It's not reality. The reality is a much, much bigger picture when you include other factors into the situation, like the fact that people were being intimidated in this case into not giving evidence and stuff like that. You've got to take in the whole atmosphere of the area where this incident took place, the silence of people, the fear in people. It's not just about the court, it's about other factors as well that led up to this court case, and which led up to this particular information only being allowed in court.
Still saying that either you're acting in bad faith or you have other problems, shall we say, and some people...
The only person that's acting in bad faith is yourself in this situation, by not looking at the wider picture beyond the courtroom.
People will be acting in bad faith and some people will have other problems. I hope that's not you. There were many things in the film outside of what was specifically relevant to his libel defence and were not considered, and therefore there was no scrutiny.
Yeah, like all the teacher's testimony, the secret recordings that basically corroborated his whole story. Those things were not admissible into court, so weren't allowed into court scrutiny. So therefore this guy isn't going to scrutinise them. That's not particularly having a forensic view of things. Somebody with a forensic attitude would look at the evidence that wasn't allowed to be admitted into court, because if he already suspects that the judiciary, like he's said in previous videos, that certain judges are activist judges and are not impartial in court, then he would look at all the evidence, not just the evidence the court allowed to be presented.
What I'm thinking about here particularly is the apparent non-disclosure agreements where teachers were apparently paid to not talk about the matter. The reason I mention this is that they are a red herring constantly raised as if they were somehow relevant. Tommy's defence did not include NDAs because NDAs did not have any defence value against the libel claims. So his defence's ultimate failure was not contingent on lack of such evidence. Once his defence was shown to have failed, it is quite understandable that his supporters want to clutch at the remaining straws. NDAs, and also those Muslim threats, and we do have screenshots of that. This is a charming little compendium of such, with much blanking out for YouTube sensibilities. I get the confusion. The sheer proximity of those things to the issue leads people to think that they should be relevant. However, the simple fact is, somebody paying a teacher something for some reason does not act as a defence to Tommy's.
Yes, it does. Because if a council is paying teachers to stay silent to cover up the actual truth, that is very relevant to Tommy Robinson's court case, because that proves that this council has an agenda, and so does the judiciary, doesn't it? Because it's all part of the establishment, that they all want to keep the status quo. They don't want to be exposed as being corrupt. So those things are very relevant to this case. And Tommy didn't get a fair hearing. It's quite obvious he didn't get a fair hearing in this courtroom. The court had already made its mind up that Tommy Robinson was going to be guilty. I've got no doubts about that in my mind. You've only got to look at his past, and like I said, you've got to look at the bigger picture outside of the courtroom, at Tommy Robinson's whole timeline in this situation. The way the judiciary has treated him, the way the police have treated Tommy Robinson, unfairly using the law against him as to persecute him. Basically, the process is the punishment, and this guy here just refuses to take that into account, that going into that courtroom, Tommy Robinson was already guilty, despite what evidence he presented. When we know this because the judge would have looked at the evidence that Tommy wanted to admit into court, the recordings of the teachers, the documentary itself. He refused that to be played in court. He actually he watched that movie in private. The judge himself, he should have dismissed himself because he had an argument with his own father about Tommy Robinson, discussing the case with somebody outside of it, which should never have happened. And yet this guy is relying on this judge's scrutiny as gospel to prove that Tommy Robinson was guilty in this instant.
Claims. It's as simple as that. All of that you've just seen sits within the scope of the libel defence and his false claims to have been unfairly treated and censored. But there is more, and this goes to the...
They're not false though, are they? It's quite obvious they're not false. They're not false claims. They're only false, and they were proven to be false because certain evidence wasn't allowed to be admissible into court. If they had, it would have been a different story. If it had been a trial by jury, which Tommy Robinson has been denied from the outset, he's never been tried by a jury at any one time. Do you want to know why? Because if he was allowed to be tried by a jury, they might find him not guilty, and that is something the establishment cannot allow to happen. That's why all these cases have always been resided over by just a judge looking at the evidence, because a judge can come to the right conclusions. When you hand it out to the general public, it's a wild card. Anything could happen. They don't want to take any chances of Tommy Robinson being proved correct and the establishment being proved wrong.
The whole dishonest nature of the thing. In this photo, Tommy's on the left with the older brother of Bailey McLaren, Rhys McLaren, circled underneath in the photo. And this photo was posted earlier this year, 23rd of January, on the older McLaren boy's Twitter. And you can see how he says it's from almost a decade before the incident. A young Tommy and Mac, 2009-2010. Tommy posts underneath, memories, and Rhys comes back from the very beginning. I believe Big Brother is a friend of his from his EDL days, but I can't confirm that.
So if you're going solely on evidence here, which is what you're doing, then you're claiming that Tommy Robinson is a friend of the family, and you admit yourself you can't confirm that. So if we're going to go by court rules, then that's just dismissed. That's irrelevant because you can't prove it. Yeah, we're doing a forensic analysis, don't forget. In a forensic analysis, you have to know your facts. If you can't factually say that is true, then the piece of evidence that you're admitting here has to be dismissed as false, doesn't it?
We all understood that Tommy's involvement in this was entirely organic. He heard about it the same way the rest of us did. He hot-footed it up there, he found the family, he got to know them, and he impartially assessed the situation. He never mentioned that, amazingly coincidental as it is, he was in fact a long-time friend of the family.
You've just stated in your previous statement you couldn't confirm whether he was a long-time friend of that person. So now you're stating it as fact in your next statement, saying that Tommy Robinson was definitely a friend, a long-time friend of the family. Which is it? You can't have both. And let's say Tommy Robinson was a lifelong friend of the family. It's not like he just went up there and just ran with what the story the family was saying. He went up there and did his own investigation. He got secret cameras, he went in and he went and investigated it. He was an investigative journalist. He found out the truth for himself. And when he interviewed the teachers, he found out what the family was saying was factually true, because they were confirming everything that Bailey was saying about Jamal.
Why not? Because he goes from being an impartial observer, as we all thought, to having an axe to grind on behalf of the family, and his position therefore needs to be taken with a bucket load of salt. Do you remember the South Cambridgeshire police matter, where Tommy forgot, again, to mention that there was actually a police operation in the pub, which ended up making the police look a whole lot less bad than they were, in fact quite reasonable. Do you see the pattern of dishonesty? So this here is very revealing. He is fighting for our country, which is more than the C words turning it into a third world shithole are doing. I don't give a shit about any technicalities. Technicalities is a euphemism for the facts of the matter. In other words...
But you're not presenting the facts of the matter, aren't you? You're presenting your interpretation of the facts, just like the judge was doing. You're not looking at the bigger picture that's involved here, because you have some kind of personal axe to grind against Tommy Robinson, don't you?
Tommy can say anything, I don't care. The high I get from the rallies, the hero worship, the God worship, the donations, that's all that matters.
It sounds like you've got some kind of grudge against Tommy Robinson by saying that, doesn't it? Look at the smug look on his face. It's like, so what about the rallies? What's relevant about the rallies? The rallies are to unite people, to bring people together, and nobody can deny that's a bad thing. The rallies have been peaceful, bringing people together, uniting people, celebrating this country and its culture. What is wrong with that? And the donations. He needs the donations for the court cases. I don't think there's been a time when he's not been taken to court or the law is being used against him to silence him. Sounds like you've got some kind of envy of Tommy Robinson, to me.
I initially had my doubts about this being a grift. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense. But when you look at the sheer scale that he's aiming at, the money aspect does make more sense, and you can overthink these things. Doesn't everything come down to money at the end of the day? Yeah, prison time, but if you're...
So where's the forensic analysis? This is just your opinion now. Where's all the evidence to back up what you're saying? There isn't any. You're just asserting Tommy Robinson is a grifter. aren't you? With no evidence whatsoever.
You're looking at being picked up by an Aston DB9 at the gates. That makes the whole present thing look entirely less impalatable.
I could think of easier ways to grift. It would be quite easier for Tommy Robinson just to join the ranks of the far left and just be on the side of the Islamists, wouldn't it? He wouldn't get any hassle then, and he could grift all he likes. Let's look at your claim that this is just a grift and he just wants the donations, right? He's putting himself at great personal risk and his family to make these documentaries. Something that you don't take in consideration. You don't mention the Osman warnings that he gets constantly. The reason why he has to live outside the UK is because certain gangs have threatened to kill him if they find him. They've come to his family's home, his mother's home, his mother and dad's home, with baseball bats and knives, and threatened to smash it in and to kill him. The police have been round. There's documentation of the police stating this, giving him Osman warnings. Look, Tommy, your life is in real danger. It's not the sort of thing that you would expect from someone that's trying to con people or grift off others, is it? To put themselves in great personal risk to do it. That's not really the definition of a grifter. They tend to play it safe. They tend to be on the easy side of things where there's no personal threat to themselves, is there? I think you're jumping on the bandwagon of a certain group of people in all of this, just to demonise and label Tommy Robinson as a grifter, to once again silence him and smear him as somebody who's not to be trusted.
Tommy is not going to let this go while he is coining it, whether he is in jail or subsequently outside jail. But apart from that aspect, the money aspect, there is nowhere to go with this because his claims are a hoax, which you will understand, which I'm sure you...
What claims are a hoax? You're not offering up any information whatsoever about what he's hoaxed. You're just stating it without any evidence to back it up. All Tommy Robinson's claims are a hoax. Really? Where's the evidence for that then? He's supposed to be doing a forensic analysis. I haven't seen any forensic analysis yet. It's just you rehashing what the judge said and taking his word for it as being gospel without taking any consideration whatsoever that this judge might have an agenda based on who Tommy Robinson is and what he stands for.
do understand, taking into account absolutely everything and not just what suits, as in everything I've laid out, which is summarized here. You cannot sustain a hoax. It can't lead anywhere that you want it to lead because it's not factually based. It won't lead here to the exposure of deep state corruption because the deep state is not at fault. But it will carry on leading somewhere lucrative for him while your debit card's still freely flowing. And when the proverb...
It sounds like this guy's got a real axe to grind against Tommy Robinson being given donations. I think this is just the basis for why this guy doesn't like him. Like I said before, he treated other people who fell foul of the law totally different to Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson deserves all he gets, according to this guy, because he broke the law. Yet, when it comes to other people, when it comes to Lucy Connolly, she didn't deserve the full force of the law because the judge was an activist and had an agenda. It's just bias. It's just complete bias against Tommy Robinson in this video. This isn't a forensic analysis. It's a hatchet job. It's a smear job against Tommy Robinson just to make him look untrustworthy.
proverbial hits the fan and you end up disappointed and frustrated. Yeah, partially blame Tommy, but also blame the people who financed it and allowed it to happen. Or simply stop it from happening. It's not about deep state corruption. It's not about Tommy being censored. And if you don't understand that now that I've laid it out as clearly as I have, you never will. I cannot lay it out any clearer than this. And it's...
You haven't laid anything out. You haven't laid anything out at all. You haven't proven anything at all.
certainly nothing to do with Islam. To be quite honest, it's about Tommy defrauding you. Obtaining money by deception is fraud, and he's deceiving you. I am being...
Really? That would be a libelous claim if you're making that claim, and you better be able to back up what you're saying with evidence if you're going to make that sort of claim against somebody.
prosecuted in the High Court for contempt for daring to show the world the truth about what happened in Armandbury. The lie, he's not, he breached a legitimate injunction, followed by the begging bowl. How?
But we have to look at why that video was banned in the first place. Why was it? Like I said before, it was a high-profile case. That documentary proved that there was corruption going on within that local council. It was paying its teachers to stay silent. And we don't have to take Tommy's word for that. We can look at the teachers' own statements and what they were saying. They were terrified. They didn't want to speak out that they were going to lose their jobs. The headmaster did lose his job. And you fail to mention in any of this that the school was closed down. And the teachers themselves said, the head teacher himself said, the school was closed down to get rid of the situation, to cover it up completely, to get rid of the school. That's how desperate they were. And if you think they're going to go to the lengths of closing a school down, do you really think they would stop at banning a documentary that highlighted their corruption? Because I don't. I think they would quite willingly do that to silence Tommy Robinson from exposing the truth. So it's not a lie, is it? When you look at the bigger picture, he was silenced. He was taken to court for libel to silence him, ironically, about a documentary called Silenced, simply because he wanted to expose the truth about corruption in our judiciary and our local governments. Something you can't accept because you have a personal bias against Tommy Robinson. So this isn't a forensic analysis on your part. This is just a one-sided attack on Tommy.
Is that not money by deception, or fraud by false representation, as they call it? That is the lie, that is the money pitch. How is that essentially different to the Nigerian who gets money for an air ticket off a woman who he's promised to marry, then she never hears from him again? It's money by deception. Why not earmark your money for a worthy cause? For example, for the fundraiser of the 5-year-old son of Rhiannon Sky White, who worked in an immigrant hotel and who was killed by an immigrant. Do you think that might be a better cause? Well, do you know what? I can do both. No, either put it all towards the deserving cause, or put half of it towards the deserving cause and keep the rest for yourself. This is not a criticism of well-intentioned supporters and rallygoers who are not happy, for example, that Peter Lynch was sentenced to death for shouting, while the Manchester Airport Muslim attackers haven't even been charged, and they even might in fact prosecute the cops who were attacked. It is also not a criticism of the people who are not happy that a recent immigrant kills a woman working in a hotel, which is putting him up for...
All these situations highlighted by Tommy Robinson, by the way, doesn't mention that at all.
Free. It's obviously not a criticism of those people, but can those well-intentioned people please stop allowing themselves to be fleeced by these lies? And to underline that again, and to finish off with the main point of the video, I'll leave my little summary screen up for a few seconds at the end. Remember, the claim, "Oh my God, it's outrageous, have you watched the film?" Have I heard that 1,000 times at this point? Then the scrutiny, "Oh, I get it, claim debunked." Claim, scrutiny, debunked.
It seems to me like this guy went into the situation with his mind made up. Tommy's guilty. Doesn't matter what he presents as evidence. He's guilty, no matter what. Tommy's a grifter. He's trying to con supporters out of money. I don't care what the evidence says. I'm just going to make a video and just claim that he's guilty. And that's it. Where was the forensic analysis? I didn't see any forensic analysis. Somebody doing a forensic analysis would have actually looked at all the evidence. The evidence that the court considered, the evidence that the court didn't consider, in order to come to a complete conclusion about the situation. But that didn't happen in this video whatsoever. All this guy did was look at one particular bit of information. No regard for the mitigating circumstances in this situation, the witness intimidation that was included in the silenced documentary. and actually the teachers' testimony themselves saying that Jamal was a liar. He was constantly put in isolation because he was lying to the teachers. He constantly came up with stories. He made up stories. That is very relevant to Tommy Robinson's libel case because it proves that Jamal is a liar and that Tommy Robinson was telling the truth. But obviously, no, this guy is biased towards Tommy Robinson, and he's not interested in what he's got to say. And like I said, he calls him a grifter. And I've got to repeat this. There are easier ways to grift than put your life in danger, aren't there? Constantly from a certain demographic in our society. But there you go. That wasn't a forensic analysis by this guy by any means or whatever. It was just basically him having an axe to grind against Tommy Robinson and getting donations, apparently. So yeah, this is Vindicator, signing off.